actually continuing on our series, Nurturing Faith in the Wilderness. So if you wasn't around with us last week, I was just talking about how in the book of Numbers, it talks about how the people of God, Israel, they were moving from one existence. They were enslaved in Egypt, and they're moving towards a new existence, a promised land. And so they were kind of in this in-between times. And I was saying how similar to that, we're in this in-between time right now. We've come from one place of normality, haven't we? And we're moving to a new normality, hopefully soon. But we're kind of in this in between these two times. We're in that kind of a wilderness place. But what I was saying last week is that to do wilderness time was not a rare thing in the Bible. You know, if you read through the entire story of faith, the Bible, right from the start to the end, all the individuals that had a significant God-given role. So like we talk about the heroes of the story, the heroes of the Bible, they all had their time in the wilderness. And it's like they had to do that. They had to go there. It certainly seems like God specifically puts them in the wilderness place to do a work in them that it seems you can't or he doesn't do in any other area of our lives. So I was saying to us last week, let's not waste this time that we're in. Let's use this time to, better to restructure and recenter our life around God. Let's develop intentional connection times with God in our practices. So if you was with us, you know, we're also using the Bible Project, or a video created by the Bible Project, to help us to get a good sort of overview of the book of Numbers. And so we're going to actually come back to that now. I'm going to let it play through just a little bit further. It's going to play to the point where it's going to kind of bring us up to today's teaching. So Angie, if you want to launch that.
The book of Numbers gets overlooked, partly because it has a really boring name.
Which is a shame. In the Hebrew tradition, the book's name is Bamidbar, which means in the wilderness. And it's an epic travelogue about Israel's journey through the desert on their way to the land promised to Abraham.
Now, this pilgrimage should only take about 2 weeks on foot.
But instead, it takes them about 40 years.
That's crazy. It's practically half of someone's lifetime.
Yeah, it's a very long camping trip with lots of interesting stories, but let's remember, it's most helpful to back up and start with how this book is designed.
Right.
So the book is broken up into 5 sections. There are 3 wilderness locations, broken up by 2 road trips that link all the pieces together.
The first wilderness section is Mount Sinai, right here on the map.
And then in the second section, they travel to a region called Paran.
A whole bunch of things happen here in the wilderness of Paran.
And then in this 4th section is Israel's road trip to Moab.
The book ends with a large section in the wilderness of Moab, right across the Jordan River from the Promised Land.
Now, through all of these sections, the storyline just flows like a gripping dramatic movie. Everything starts great, but then the trip goes horribly wrong, and it all ends with the final redemptive moment, the surprising act of God's grace.
So let's jump into this story. It all begins at the wilderness at Mount Sinai, and we've become really familiar with this mountain.
Yeah, if you remember, Israel came here after Egypt, and they formed a covenant with God here, got the 10 Commandments here, built the tabernacle here, and they've been at this mountain for 1 full year.
And now they take a census to number the people as they prepare to leave.
Right, and they're given these instructions for how to organize all those people in the camp. God's presence in the tabernacle, and then the tribe of Levi and the priests around it, and then the rest of the tribes around them. And this pattern, it's this visual symbol for how God's holiness is at the center of their existence as a people.
And they're told that when the cloud of God's presence moves, they're to pack up and travel with it.
Yeah, the Ark of the Covenant is carried by the Levites out in front, and then the tribe of Judah, and on and on. And this order is also a symbol for how God's holy presence is their leader and guide through the wilderness.
We begin the second section of the book with enthusiasm as they leave Mount Sinai and travel up to Paran. God's with them, everything's organized. This is going to be great.
But it's not great. After just 3 days on the road, the people are complaining about their hunger and thirst, and then even Moses' brother and sister start bad-mouthing him in front of all the people.
Not a great start.
I guess this week, if I was to put a title on this week's talk, it would be how to have a good moan. I feel like having a good moan this morning about technology, but how to have a good moan. So essentially in the video we see that the people of Israel, they've come out of Egypt, they've come out of slavery, and they are just so pleased about that, but it seems that their happiness very quickly turns sour and they start to whine and whinge and moan and so on. And it's like, they have freedom, they've got this freedom, but it's not turning out to be as they'd expected it to be. There were things that they were once familiar with, that they had, that they'd perhaps taken for granted, and they no longer have those things. And so they begin to complain. I guess the question is, during this season, this crazy season that we're in, have you found yourself complaining about things? No, Rob, I don't complain. We're not the sort of complaining, moany, whingy type. Have you, I guess, expressed complaints over the recent weeks? I mean, I think it's fair to say that there have been plenty of things to complain about. Having to stay home, we're not able to socialise with friends and family, and all those restrictions. I don't know, has anybody had to cancel their family holiday? Or at least made adjustments to their holiday arrangements? Has anybody had to become like a full-time teacher to your own kids? All at the sort of in parallel with having to sort of balance home life and work life and your finances and keeping everything afloat. Or are there any sort of keen sports fans, enthusiasts, not being able to go to watch your team play or that sporting event that you would have gone to? Has anyone had a life stage celebration, like a birthday? I mean, celebrating birthday at this time is a bit weird, isn't it? Maybe you get to do a Zoom party or, have at least one friend or a couple of friends around in the garden for your birthday party. I mean, it's crazy. It's just we're in such unprecedented and disruptive and strange, such a strange place. There has been many things over this last 6 months for us to complain about. And so in the passage that Kate kindly read for us there, we read about the complaints of the Israelites. They shouldn't be, or they seem to be quite familiar to us, because in essence they're the same in nature to our complaints, the things that we complain about. The complaints of the Israelites, first of all, they take on a specific shape, as a kind of a form, and it's one of blame. And I think we do that often, don't we? With things that we're kind of going through, things that we're struggling with, we want to pin blame on someone. And, does it make it any better for us? Now, I'm sure you've heard or seen all the finger pointing that's gone on over the past weeks and months. Let's blame that country or this government or this particular age group of people. It's their fault. It's their fault for why we're in this sort of mess. Now, if I can offer something else, if you're still hanging around thinking, I want to put blame on something for why we're in this place, I'm going to offer you something else. It was a virus. That's what we can blame. A virus, nothing else. It's a virus. The thing is, does that help us? Whatever you want to hang the blame for what we're going through, it's going to be passed on to somebody else or something else at some stage. So, but does it help our situation? Does it make us feel any better? I would argue probably not. But here's the crazy thing regarding our complaints, or certainly in the story the Israelites are going through. They're complaining, but they're complaining about the very thing that they wanted. It's the thing that they've been hoping for, the thing that they've been waiting on and crying out to God for generations. And God hears their cries, and through sort of miracle after miracle after miracle, he brings the people out into freedom. But it's not the freedom that they envisaged it to be. They aren't free, or they are free, but they're not free exactly how they wanted to be free. And so they feel justified now in their complaining. And I think there are many, many people today who are exactly the same as that. Maybe you relate to it, or perhaps you're thinking, oh, no, I'm not a moany type, but I do know moany people. I do know people that complain a lot and so on, and about the things that they wanted. But many, at some time in their life stages, they are always expressing their frustration about the things that they don't have, sort of like, one day I'm going to have that job, that job I've been going for. One day I'm going to have that career that I've been anchoring after, or someday I'll have that dream home, or that car that I've been wanting. I don't know if you've said anything like that yourself, or can you look back in your own life and remember saying something like, "Oh man, if I could only be married." Oh, just to be able to have that sort of life partner to do, to sort of settle down with. Here's a funny one. I'll never be happy until we've got kids. At least 3 or 4 of them. But so many people have vocalised, and maybe you know them, maybe you are them, that vocalise these desires and these dreams. And the crazy thing is when we've got these things that we so dearly wanted, it's interesting how many of those same people end up sitting in counselling rooms or church pastoral rooms, complaining how it hasn't turned out how they thought it was going to. It hasn't, turned out how they imagined it would be. But then it goes even further than that. It's like the disappointments and the discomfort, the things that they are complaining about, it causes some kind of distortion in their view of how things used to be. You hear people say, "Oh man, if only I was single again. I was so happy when I was single, I was so free." And it's like, hang on, no, you wasn't. I was there, and the way I remember it, you were so miserable. You hated seeing everybody else in relationships and getting married and so forth. Or they say, "Oh, before we had a family, we had all that free time. We could kind of sleep in at the weekend and so on. It was just awesome." But again, it's like, hang on, no, it wasn't like that. You were just so depressed about needing to have a family. But I just think it's so amazing how the disruptions and the discomforts that we encounter in these sort of in-between times, these wilderness times, they can so destabilize us and distort the things and retell our stories from our past and make things look way, way better than back then than when what they actually were. And that's what the wilderness does. We find ourselves reminiscing over false memories of how things once were. We're never content with what we have in the present, and we always are anchoring after something way, way better in the future. And that's exactly how the story is playing out with Israel in the passage that we're reading this morning. And by the way, this is kind of similar. We see it played out numerous times in a number of passages over the Bible. But let's just come back to this. Numbers 11, right at the beginning, it opened up and said, "Now the people, they complained about the hardships in the hearing of the Lord. And when he heard them, his anger was aroused. Then fire from the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. When the people cried out to Moses, he prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down." So that place was called Taberah or Taberah. It literally means burning. So it's called Taberah because fire from the Lord had burned among them. Now, you can accuse me here of my logic being quite simplistic. But if this was you and your complaining has stirred God to anger, such that he appeared as this furious, consuming fire, and eventually it kind of was died down because of Moses' prayer, you would probably think, okay, guys, this complaining thing, it's probably not a good idea, right? Shall we stop doing that? So if that was you, maybe that's the way you would kind of logically think this through. But not the Israelites. Verse 4, it says, "The rabble with them began to crave other food. And again, the Israelites started wailing and said, 'Oh, if only we had meat to eat.' We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, onions, and the garlic. Oh, the garlic. That's, I can't know, I read it anyway. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna. Now this manna, by the way, that they seem to be so displeased and indignant about, is God's direct provision from heaven for them in the wilderness. Without this, they would have had nothing. But again, you can see how this distortion, as kind of they reminisce over their past. It's like they were regretting leaving Egypt. If only we could be back there. All that lovely food that we had. It's like, yeah, you might have been slaves and, labour for people, treated like, somebody's property, but you had fish. You had fish and you had onions or whatever. But in the discomfort and the confusion of the wilderness, what happens is we have this tendency to focus on the things that are missing. We focus on what we don't have, what we've lost, and ignore the things that are actually being provided. So this is largely the makeup then of our complaints, Ange, if you want to bring that back up. They're often founded on a need to blame. They're often related to things that we wanted to change anyway, and they distort our view of how things actually were before. And I have to say, guys, this is not healthy. It's not a healthy means of complaining. Neuroscience, they've done a whole load of studies on what happens in our brains when we complain. When they kind of put probes all over somebody's head and they can see graphically what is happening inside the brain under certain circumstances or when you go through certain events. And I was talking about this a little while ago. It's pretty recent studies around what they call neuroplasticity, how when someone, for example, loses their hearing, like I did, how the brain, from a neurological perspective, the brain rewires itself and it creates new neurological pathways to enable the individual to cope and kind of compensate for the loss of their hearing sense. Now, something similar actually takes place on a neurological level when we complain about things. Our thinking, it disrupts and kind of injures our brain neurology, and it rewires in such a way that it becomes harder and harder not to seek out things to complain about as we go forward. So more and more, you become increasingly disposed towards complaining and less able to be satisfied. It becomes almost impossible for you to experience gratitude. You're always yearning for something better. Now, I find this stuff really fascinating, but a little scary all at the same time. You may have come across people who they are never satisfied. I'm sure this is none of you, by the way. Yeah, we're not like that. But you know people who never seem to be satisfied. There's never enough wealth. They're always wanting the next mobile phone or the next car, the next home. It's like moving from career to career. They just wanted another job. They moved from relationship to relationship. But it's like they did it to themselves. They've rewired their own neurological pathways in their brain, and that's now how they are kind of disposed. And it's very, very hard and takes a lot of time to undo that. Now, the good news is that during their studies, these scientists, they also discovered that there is a healthy way to complain. So there you go. It's not about eliminating complaining from our life altogether. It's about how to have a good moan. That's why I was thinking about titling this talk, Having a Good Moan. How to have a good moan. And in actual fact, the discovery that they made about healthy complaining, it actually mirrors what we find in the Bible about complaints. And actually in this very passage here in a moment. So there is a healthy way of complaining that we find in the Bible, And actually, the psychologists, they call it instrumental complaining. There you go. It's instrumental complaining. So let's take a look at the makeup or the nature of instrumental complaint. The first thing about instrumental complaint, the goal of instrumental complaint is change. And the intent for the change starts looking at yourself. So instrumental complaint says, yes, I am discontent. I'm not happy about this situation. It's difficult. But what can I do to bring about change? What does this thing say about me? What can I do to be a part of the solution to this? So it starts by us looking in the mirror, and it begins with me, and then it looks to others, and it says, who can I round up or join with me to make this change happen? Now, this kind of complaint, if you kind of put it into the context of like a married relationship, for example, maybe you're in the midst of real tense financial issues, disruption or whatever, and it's kind of like the husband to the wife or the wife to the husband saying, look, we have mounted up lots of debt, or our income, for whatever reason, has taken a downturn. Can we sit down and make a plan? We need to build some kind of new budgeting plan. Yes, I'm complaining and discontent about our financial position right now, but I'm complaining and I'm sharing this burden with you as my spouse so that we can actually work together to build towards a different future reality, if you like. I think that makes sense. We see instrumental complaining in the Bible quite a lot. It's called prayer. It's just prayer. As followers of Jesus or people of God, we know that the person that can help us out the most in the things that kind of frustrate us and the things that we battle, it's God himself. As we were singing about earlier on, who do we look to? Do we look to the mountains and the strong things of this world? No, we turn our eyes to God. He is our help. But the best instrumental complaint in prayer, like sort of essentially what it does, it goes, God, what does this situation say about me? And how can it be changed with your help? We see this kind of prayer all the way through the scriptures. But let's have a look at Moses' prayer and his complaint right now. So coming in again from verse 10, it says, Moses heard the people of every family wailing at the entrance to their tents. The Lord became increasingly angry, and Moses was troubled. He asked the Lord, why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you, that you have put this burden of all these people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth? Why did you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant to the land that you promised on oath to their ancestors? Where can I get meat? All the people are where can I get meat for all these people? They keep wailing to me. Give us meat to eat. I cannot carry all these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you are going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me right now. If I have favor in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin. Now, essentially, what Moses is praying is, God, if you are asking, something of me, tell me what it is, and then give me the ability to actually carry it out. It's like I'm aware of my own limitations, and I don't have enough strength in and of myself to do what I think you're asking, but you can. Help me to change this situation. And so, now if you think about it, Moses, he's kind of looking into the past. Moses knows fully what God has done in their past, the miraculous things, the power displayed by God. And he knows that God was the one that gave birth to the nation Israel, that God has nursed them through the foundation years of the nation. He knows that God is the one that promised to bring them into this land of promise. So he knows that if there's anyone can actually make what needs to happen, he knows that if anybody is going to do that for the sake of the present circumstances and for the future, then it's God. It's only God that can do that. It's like, I can't do this, but you can. And so I'm bringing my complaint, my request to you, God. That's firstly. Secondly, instrumental complaint. It begins with remembering and gratitude. So right at the starting place for instrumental complaint is remembering and it's gratitude. And now we see this most clearly through the complaint prayers in the Psalms of David. I mean, you've probably read lots of them. There are many. Over and over again, he says things like, God, yeah, I know who you are, but this situation is so troubling. It's so overwhelming. It's confusing. And I don't know how I'm possibly going to get through this. Yet I know that you have asked me to do something. You've asked something of me and you're doing something. So I choose to trust. I choose to praise you for all that you've already done. And I praise you for that, the fact that you're always faithful. And I know that you're going to come through for the people who you love. That is consistent through many of David's Psalms. So our instrumental complaint remembers and it shows gratitude for all that God has done for us in the past and in the present and moving forward, and a hope and a praise for moving forward. Lastly then, instrumental complaint calls us to take action. When we make an instrumental complaint, what we're saying is, I am prepared to get up off my backside and get up and get on my feet and get into action. And you know what? It might not be my action or only my action that needs to be done to get us out of this wilderness situation. This might just be one of many micro steps through this process. But God, what is it that you're asking of me next? That's essentially how it begins. It's asking, what is it that I can actually do right now, no matter how big or small, to be a part of the solution to this? And this might be about us joining up with others who are taking similar steps towards action. Now, during this, or the early stages and mid stages of the pandemic, the resounding and collective complaint of so many was that, well, the medics, they were lacking quantities of safety equipment, PPE. And the problem was, and to some degree still is, a huge issue, so overwhelming for any one person or any one organisation to actually resolve. But I know that even within Vineyard Community Church here, there were many people who got connected to that complaint, but didn't simply just kind of blow out hot air and whinge and whine about it and then move on. They were moved to act on it. I was talking to Becky about this, for example. She complained. She may have complained about that, but she was also stirred to join up with a few others in making and supplying face masks and scrub bags and things that went out to hospitals, not only across the region, but across the UK. I mean, it's massive. But that's it. It's about allowing our complaint to move us to action. And no matter how big or small the steps that we can take. Some would say that what Becky did, and indeed that what Alice and her husband were able to do, it may not have resolved the UK's PPE supply chain problem, but it made a difference. It made a difference, and every single one of us can make a difference. My hope and my prayer is that, well, wouldn't it be wonderful if every person within our church was to seek out those small things that we can actually do within this crazy season to care for and to support those around us that need caring for and needing support, and that we would take our complaints and take their complaints to God. Some of the most wonderful and powerful prayers that we find in the scriptures are those that were cried out during wilderness times. So here's my prayer. May we be those who, when there are things to complain about, that we're not just hot air, whingy moaners, but we are those who are expressing complaint from a place of, what does this mean for me or to me? May we be those who are bringing our complaints to you, God, in our prayer. What are we? And I pray that we are growing in prayer and intercession for others as we intentionally draw nearer to God within our wilderness time. And may we be a people of action. Again, no matter how big or small the steps that we take, that we actually step up and to be a part of the solution rather than whingy, moany bags. So there you go. I'll leave